Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Not by hearsay. Kathy knows what loneliness is like. From the moment she was born, she has been an unwanted and untroubled life, but an entire existence. Yes, and how many of them around the country and the world cannot count. But there is not enough love and attention for everyone. It would be difficult to cope with all the responsibilities when there is a whole group of children. What kind of love can we talk about? They are fed and clothed. We have a roof over our heads. It's a sin to want more orphans. Kathy, no lineage, no tribe. And the mother and father never even had a clue. The older ones knew why they were disowned. Fate didn't even give her a chance to find out. Abandonment is commonplace. A child is born and it's not clear. Or maybe she didn't need one from the start, but was allowed to have one only because she was overcome by fear. And it is a sin to get rid of it. Moral principles do not allow it. Kathy was one of those. A beautiful little girl with clear blue eyes, bright and pure. Not even her own mother gave her a name. After signing the waiver papers, the educators christened her. A clever woman with a hurt face decided that this name would suit her best. A girl with a sense of meaning in her eyes, which has been looking at her since birth. She must grow up to be a real beauty. The educator thought to herself, she was one of the few staff members at the orphanage who sincerely did not sympathize with the abandoned children she herself never had the happiness of motherhood that many women in maternity hospitals voluntarily gave up. The mistake of her youth made itself felt, and for the rest of her life, she would never feel peace from constant soul-searching thoughts and repentance. She treated Kathy as if she were her own daughter. The girl grew up before her eyes. Her mother once said to little Kathy, 5 years old, "I am not your mother." "Molly," said the woman with wistfulness in her voice. Childhood passed like a fog, meaningless days. Wake up in the morning, exercise, breakfast in the afternoon, and reading books with the abandoned and destitute like herself. Kathy was always brooding, as if something was bothering her. Until a certain age, she could not even explain to herself what was happening to her. And when the time came, Molly opened the girl's eyes. You see, it's for life. It's impossible to get rid of it. All abandoned orphans are haunted by loneliness. You already feel a priori guilt for your mere existence. You don't understand what for. Why and by what right have they done this to you? You haven't even been born yet, and you're already guilty. Molly once said in a private conversation, "How can a person be guilty of being born? I don't consider myself a wretch." Yes, orphanhood is not something anyone would wish. I look at the youngest ones, who are just starting out in life. I think about how I was once like that myself, Kathy replied. When you go out into adulthood, you'll understand very rarely when orphans become truly happy. Low self-esteem doesn't allow them to fully enjoy this life, to achieve prosperity, to receive benefits. You think that the daughter of a tycoon from the next town opened a business with her father's money. Even if she did, it doesn't change anything. If she hadn't had her father's money, she would have found it herself. Where would she get the money? And why? Yes, because she believes that she was brought up that way, since childhood, instilled that first all for themselves, and then what will be left for others. She can't think otherwise. And such people always achieve a lot in life. We are not the ones who were raised since childhood to be second-rate. Kathy didn't realize it yet. She had not yet seen the life of poverty, the stigma of being born into society. And Molly had been through it all. She thought, dreamed, that she would leave the orphanage. That there would be a life of freedom. That's not how it turned out. A dead apartment. That's the joy of it. Some didn't even get that. Not homeless, of course. But you had to look for a place to sleep a lot. And not a soul around. You could have given me a shoulder to lean on or helped me in any way. But a vulnerable orphan, there are always hunters, such girls. Ideal candidate for the insecure and unfulfilled in life men. For the sake of someone to be near. Ready to endure a lot. The yelling, the scandals, even the beatings. In her younger days too, this wise woman, who sat opposite Kathy, shared her clever thoughts. All the gifts of fate had been experienced. In order not to finally lose her mind from loneliness, She brought a locksmith Nick into her little cell, thought maybe they could make it work. But life was becoming more and more like hell every year, drunk out of his mind. He let his hands get away with it. That's how Molly lost her baby. A mistake of youth, but unforgivable. Perhaps for the sake of the child, she could have risen. And now her whole life is like atonement. Taking care of underprivileged children. Yes, to talk heart to heart with them, so that people grow up. That's the lot. Don't count on getting a place from the state soon, girl. Not everyone is so lucky. Better think about what you already know how to do to make a living, said Molly. I'm going to work as a waitress after graduation, and then I'll save up for a house. I will not disappear. You can be sure of the naivety of his melancholy life. I will not trust the first man I meet. I will be able to arrange my life with dignity. Kathy said with confidence, do not lose touch with me. I'll give you some money as an exception. You'll get a room, you'll get a job. It's not much, but it's life at first. Then you'll think about it. I can see you're a smart girl. I believe that you can find your way in life. Well, at first you still need support. I know how hard it is. Molly, you said you led what you did not believe in, but she really wanted to cheer the girl up, to give her hope for a happy and prosperous future. It was time to get ready for graduation. There was almost no time left. In just a few days, a completely different life would begin. The pleasant breakfasts, lunches, warring games, conflicts with peers and sleepless, and loneliness would be forever in the past. But it only seemed that way. So that long-awaited day had come. Yesterday's children looked like adults, ready to go out into a difficult and challenging life. The bravest ones were not afraid of anything. They were confident in their own strength and perfection. For some reason, they were convinced that life in an orphanage was a tremendous experience for which other people would respect them by default. One could not explain to naive teenagers that being an orphan is not only a social stigma, but also a psychological one. People are wary of such people because so many stereotypes have been formed. Unlike many of her peers, Kathy did not expect the big world to welcome her with open arms. Even before graduation, she had been sneaking out of the orphanage under the cover of Molly to look for a suitable place to live. The town, though small, wasn't big enough for the room Molly bought. I had to look around the neighborhood, where grannies were always renting out small houses. Increase in pension never hurt. Therefore, tenants are worth their weight in gold. Such a shack, and found for myself Kathy for the first time. I'll make some money and I'll move right in. She thought to herself, examining the dilapidated walls with old wallpaper and windows, which are blown away by the wind even in warm weather. But the rent was reasonable and not far from the city. The bus stop is very close. That was the only thing Kathy really cared about. She could figure out how to spend the night in a bar like this. Good afternoon. I'm here about the job. Do you still need waiters? Kathy asked the receptionist as she crossed the threshold of another diner. She'd been to every decent place in town. I drove to the interview every day. I left the house at 8:00 a.m. and returned well after midnight. Buses ran regularly, but very rarely. In order not to be late for my morning flight, I had time to get ready and clean up. I had to get up at 5:00 a.m. There was not even a question of communication. Instead of a shower, there was a basin with hot water from a kettle and a wash basin. And so every day, we had to wash things by hand. Even if there was bad weather, rain, slush, and mud outside. Sometimes things would go on for 2 days. Because of this, there was a smell of dampness to hide the bad smell. Kathy, all the splashing out of them when she washed her head was also a whole story. Sometimes she even seriously considered getting a short haircut, but she never dared to do it, and she was too afraid to get it done. So there was nowhere to go. And a girl with no hair at all will be a special and very strange attitude. That's the way it is. It can't be helped. You have to conform. Otherwise, you can't survive. How old are you? What kind of work experience do you have? The receptionist's voice sounded a little tired and dull. My name is Kathy. I'm 18 years old. Unfortunately, I don't have any work experience yet, but I'm willing to learn. I am a very hardworking and motivated person. I really need this job. We cannot offer instead of a waiter. You understand yourself that we have a small town, and we value our reputation. There aren't many establishments, so the slightest slip-up and our place could lose its image forever. As an internship, we can invite you to work as a busboy. What would I have to do? You will, so to speak, at the catch collecting dishes, taking them to the sink, wipe down the tables after guests leave, help the waiter, take out dishes, do other small errands. And what is the salary? We can't offer much. All the same, this job does not require any special skills. You will be working at a rate of $1 per hour, plus a percentage of tips, the waiter. But you can get invaluable experience, which will be useful to you in the future. It is quite possible that in our institution you will grow to the position of a waiter. There was nowhere to go. The money Molly had given her when she left the orphanage was quickly running out. Soon there would be nothing left to go into town on, so they had to save a lot of money. Kathy decided to go for it. Another question, and how often do you get a salary? Kathy clarified. Frequency of payment is probably daily depending on your arrangements. With the waiter, we pay the hourly rate twice a month. But if you have a completely hopeless situation, we can make an exception for you. Tired, the receptionist replied. He was obviously not the first person he had talked to, and was rather tired of the same questions and answers. Kathy decided not to tire herself or him anymore. Yes, if possible, the first month I would like to receive a daily settlement. It would help me to settle my financial situation, making an unfortunate and pitiful appearance. Said Kathy, "All right, come back tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. Please don't be late. Our restaurant opens at 10 a.m. and you will need time to get acquainted with the waiter and get ready for the day's work. Have a good day. Goodbye." She walked out of the restaurant absolutely devastated. The only thing that made her happy was the daily paycheck, which would allow her to survive somehow. She was already denying herself adequate food, eating nothing but surrogate food all the time. She did not even think about beautiful things and cosmetics. Her clothes were the apple of her eye. What if something ripped? She would have to sew them up because she had no money for a new one and was not expecting it anytime soon. When she reached home, she heated a modest dinner, buckwheat and small pieces of chicken. That was what she had to eat for the whole month, to put away at least some of what she earned. It's okay, I'll get out of poverty anyway. She thought to herself, not even knowing that soon her thoughts of poverty would take a back seat. Why are the tables dirty again? The customer at table 3 has been waiting half an hour for his orange juice. What kind of attitude is that? Shouted the waitress Christina to the entire restaurant kitchen. Now I just physically do not have time to serve all these tables, meekly muttered Kathy. She never once mentioned that the working conditions they had agreed on were not met in the first place. Christina was shifting all the chores she didn't want to do onto her. The amount of work was 2 to 3 times the amount stated from the tip. Kathy got at best 30%. Christina was always finding something to complain about, and it had a big impact. Kathy's paycheck was full of joyless days. Every day she had to get up at 6 o'clock a.m. to get cleaned up and drive to the restaurant. She had to arrive strictly 1 hour before the opening. Late arrivals were assessed hefty fines, which were deducted from her salary. The money she earned was barely enough to buy food and pay for what she ate at home. This day was the same as the day before. Kathy arrived at the restaurant and was immediately confronted with Christina's attacks. She was always dissatisfied with something. There was always something she didn't like. Sometimes Kathy had the feeling that she had asked for an assistant on purpose to bully him. But she was patient. There was no other way out. At the time, this job was the only thing she could support herself with. Thoughts of saving for school were a thing of the past. She had to work even on weekends to have enough money. And for a long time, this would go on. I'll read another 10% of my tips for dirty tables and waiting customers, said Christina. But today, I'll get a $3 tip and a $10 hourly rate. Thought to herself Kathy, that's not enough money. Not for anything. It only took $2 to get from home to the restaurant and back. Of the remaining $11 a day, she spent $8 on food. The rest went to pay her rent, and absolutely no prospects. That night was a rainy one. Kathy left the restaurant very late, so she missed the bus. The next one wasn't for another hour. And that was the time she had to spend in cold, wet stops. There was a roof, but it was leaking so the water droplets wouldn't get on her hair. Kathy put a lightweight scarf over her head, which she always carried with her. She stood like that for 15 minutes. When the car stopped near the bus stop, Kathy was frightened. But overcoming her fear, she still responded to the driver's greeting. It was too cold outside, and the bus might not come at all because of the weather conditions. Walking home was impossible. It was too far. "Miss, do you need a ride?" asked an attractive-looking young man looking out of the car window. "If you are some kind of maniac, you will visit rape and then kill more," jokingly, rather than fearfully, replied Kathy. "Oh, really, girl? Do I look like a maniac? Look at me. I am a young, healthy young man. I'm not a maniac either. I'm only 20 years old, and my father gave me the car. I'm on my way from him right now. I was visiting my parents." Kathy was won over by such openness and goodwill, and the young man seemed to her to be of good character. She got into the car, and deep in her heart she was grateful to fate for this chance to get home and not get sick. The cold weather had done its work, and there was no way she could get sick, otherwise there would be nothing to live for at all. Anthony held out his hand to the young man. Kathy responded with a handshake. "Where to go?" "The village is outside the city, but by car shouldn't take us very far. We can talk on the road, so it won't be boring, and I can put on some music. If you don't want to talk, let's chat. I'm even at work all day. In short, good for you, I don't even have friends with anyone, because all my free time is taken up by work." "What do you do, if it's not a secret?" "Sure. I got a job as a waitress to support myself. I'm an orphan. I don't have a place to live, no help from anywhere. I wanted to save up for school so I could get a degree and a steady job. But so far, it's not working out." You have an interesting life, but I'm a student. I'm studying to be a lawyer. But to tell you the truth, I don't care about that profession. I went to university purely to avoid upsetting my parents. They're educated, intelligent people. My son without a degree, it's a shame for the family. And then I do not know, think of something, but it is unlikely I will go to work in my specialty. All the way. Kathy thought about how different people's destinies are. Why some get everything purely by birthright, as beloved and coveted children, and others are abandoned to their fate by their parents, without even giving them a name. Is there any justice in this world? Or is life built on the principle of who is luckier? She didn't even notice how they drove up to the house. Nor had she heard much of what he was saying. "Leave your phone number." Unobtrusively, and again as if in jest, Anthony asked. At these words, Kathy came to her senses, wiggled out of her thoughts. "I don't have a phone," she answered aloof. "What do you mean you don't have a phone?" "We just call people we know." "Who do you talk to?" "I have no one to call." "Well, it was nice meeting you." Thanks for the ride while she got out of the car and went to her berries. There was no other name for a small village house without any utilities. Once home, instead of strong and hot tea, she pulled out a 40-degree. She had never allowed herself such a thing. But today was a special day. She sat with a shot glass and a piece of sausage by the window. Raindrops pounded on the roof, oozing under the glass. She was so sick and tired of everything that she seemed to feel nothing. Indifference and fatigue were the only feelings that overwhelmed her. She had even forgotten the envy she had felt for this successful and wealthy young man just a few minutes before. She was about to fall asleep on the go, the strong drink combined with fatigue doing its work. Through sleep, she heard a knocking. From what instantly opened her eyes, she must have imagined it. It was the middle of the night. Who would go out at a time like that? Or maybe it was Anthony back. She thought to herself, but the knocking didn't stop. Then it was not an imagination. Taking the hammer in her hands, Kathy walked quietly toward the door. She opened the door with a bang. On the threshold stood a dirty man. His clothes were so worn that they already had holes shining in them. When she saw him, Kathy was taken aback. For several seconds, they just stared at each other, not knowing what to say. "Mistress, let the poor man warm up. I won't hurt you. I had a hut not far from here, but the wind and hail destroyed it. I'll stay with you for a few days, and then I'll go on my wanderings. It won't be the first time I've found a new cabin. I'm used to it. But the rain and the hail are making it very hard for me to walk. I've got all my clothes around my leg. If I get sick, I'll be dead. I'm probably not a very healthy person anymore, but just don't go to doctors. Who cares about a tramp's life these days? Quietly and pleadingly, the stranger said. Kathy made welcoming gestures. She didn't know what to say anyway. The girl was shocked by what was happening, but in the eyes of the dirty tramp, she saw something that allowed her to believe him. Kathy was sure that no harm would come to her from him. The tramp made his way into the house, but did not budge. He stood like that for about 10 minutes, until the landlady came to her senses and spoke to him. "Why did you come through with surprise?" asked Kathy. "So you're the hostess, and you didn't offer me a pass," the tramp replied. "I'm sorry, it's just all so sudden. I was confused. Come on in. I'll put the kettle on and make you something to eat. You must not only be cold, you must be hungry." "Yes, I've hardly eaten anything for the last 3 days. Only what we can gather from the garbage cans. Yes, to ask the good people of that poor neighborhood. They rarely throw out food, only scraps. And few people share. Locals often have nothing to eat themselves. But at least we have a roof over our heads, and I don't even have that. I'll have to fetch water to wash myself. I ain't got no utilities." "I understand. I'll sit in the corner for a while so I don't get anything dirty. And when the rain stops, I'll bring water for you and myself right away. I've lived most of my life in the country myself. That's why I'm used to it." We heated the kettle, boiled buckwheat and sausages. It was the only food left in the house. The next paycheck is not until tomorrow. There wasn't enough money for more. The tramp was spread out in a corner right on the floor. Water and mud dripped from his clothes. Anybody else would have gone a long time ago, but he was used to this kind of life. The street changes people. One has to adapt to the conditions of existence that are there. He's been used to it for a long time now, so no rain, no slush, not even snowfall had any effect on his health. He had not been sick for many years. The tramp ate with great pleasure and looked at his mistress with gratitude. She caught herself more and more that she really wanted to know his story, to look into his soul, to get to the bottom of it. In the meantime, the rain was ending outside, but it was too dark outside. "Mistress, where are your buckets? Give me the lantern," said the tramp, drinking his tea. "Maybe we can wait until morning with the hobo's great eagerness," replied Kathy. "No, you what?" "I want to sleep. I'd like to wash up and change. Don't think about it. It's no big deal. It's just from home. It looks like it's dark outside. You can't see anything, but when you go out there, you can see everything perfectly well. Give me the bucket, the lantern, and show me where your well is. And while I'm out getting water, you get the basins ready. I'll go on the porch and pray, so as not to embarrass you." He went to the well and fetched water for an hour. Kathy warmed it in a small kettle and then pounded it into iron basins so that it didn't get cold. There were no men's clothes in the house. She found only an old towel for her guest that she hadn't used in a long time. She gave her socks and shorts, a loose t-shirt from her own, which were too big for her. She had soap, shampoos, even shower gel. A razor and a razor blade were also found for the hobo. Of her clothes, only this handed her the tramp's roll. "I can't change my clothes for one night, you know, so as not to embarrass you. I cannot walk naked in front of the girl." The tramp took the roll and closed the door behind him. She could hear the water splashing on the porch and the grass outside the house. She thought of opening the door and seeing what was going on, but she didn't dare. Embarrassment took precedence over curiosity. She was embarrassed to go out on the porch at the most inconvenient moment and see what she was not supposed to see. "Well, mistress, where do you have clothes to dry, to hang up?" The tramp entered the house with a whole pile of wet clothes. Kathy was amazed at what she saw. The man was wearing the clothes she had given him. It looked a little ridiculous, but the hobo's figure stood out. "Come this way, there are ropes here. You can hang things on them," pushed Kathy. "The door to the little porch is attached to the porch." "Thank you." Mistress Tramp gently squeezed each item, and then secured them with slivers on the ropes. "Only I'm not sure they'll be dry before morning. What's the weather like outside?" Rain, slush, mud. By the way, what did you wash your clothes with? Soap. Don't worry, mistress. I've been away from home for years, but I know the prices. Shower gel is too expensive for this kind of laundry. I'm not worried. That's not what I meant. It's just that you could have said you needed to do laundry too. I would have given laundry detergent and no. Hostess. Powder leaves streaks when it's bad. And in the dark, I'm not sure I could get it out right. And my clothes are all dark. What I'll do with them later, with the streaks. And that's true when the tramp hung up all the stuff. They went back to the house. It was about 4:00 a.m. and light on the clock. All the while Kathy was thinking about how much of a transformation this tramp, who just a few hours ago had been standing by the porch, wearing things with mud and raindrops dripping off them. He looked about 45 years old, and not at all old, a trim, athletic build, and quite an attractive man. Why did she think of that? Kathy brewed some more tea and dared to ask the question she was so interested in. Excuse me, perhaps I am intruding, but I am really very interested. Maybe you can tell me about yourself, why fate has treated you so badly? How did you end up in the street? Kathy mumbled, raising pity-filled eyes to the tramp. Oh, mistress, it is a long and very unhappy story. I could do with a good night's sleep. Let's have a heart-to-heart tomorrow. With a wink at the girl, the tramp replied, But what's your name? Steve and I let's sleep. You have 2 rooms. You can lock me in one, so you feel safe. And make sure I didn't do anything bad last night. I'm not afraid of you. Yes, I have 2 rooms. In yours, I'm already in bed. I leave for work tomorrow morning and won't be back until late afternoon. There's leftover buckwheat and sausages in the fridge, tea, sugar, and other little things in the kitchen cupboards. Okay, I got it. Thank you for putting me up. Good night, hostess. They closed the door each to their own room. Through the wall, Kathy could hear the tramp come in, but she could not sleep. In a few hours, she'd have to get up and go to sleep. Tomorrow I'll be completely wrecked, Kathy thought to herself, and after a few minutes she fell asleep. For the first time in a long time, she felt perfectly happy as she walked home. This day had gone no better than the previous ones. Christina's nagging again, reprimands and fines from the tips. But none of this upset Kathy. She got on the bus and immersed herself in her thoughts. Still, there was something about this tramp that sparked the girl's genuine interest once and for all elusive, mysterious. It would seem that an ordinary tramp without lineage, without tribe. But what could be remarkable in his fate? Probably left without a roof over his head. By his own stupidity. There are very few criminals, alcoholics, petty thieves, and habitual non-payers of utilities. People who find themselves at the bottom of life rarely get back up. What am I saying? Maybe he's just a doctor or a teacher. Black realtors cheated him out of his apartment. So he was left on the street. And the fact that his wife and children have no relatives who would shelter him, at least temporarily. Well, it doesn't matter why a man prefers to be alone. Maybe he devoted his life to science or help strangers, and he had no time for himself. What thoughts swirled in Kathy's head all the way home, until she got tired of thinking. What was there to think about? Soon everything would become clear. She got off at her bus stop. It was about a 15-minute walk home. She didn't stay out too late today. She knew they were waiting. That was very important to her. On the way, I decided to stop at the store to buy something special for my guest. In all the time he'd been wandering around, he probably didn't remember what normal human food was anymore. For some reason, she wanted so badly to surround him with warmth and homeliness, to give him all the things he didn't have. Even then, last night, when she saw him at the door wet, dirty, found, as if she felt a kindred soul in him. She saw herself only as a man. Here she was, an orphan without lineage or tribe. So deceived with her own parents even at birth, no one wanted and lonely. Kathy entered the house and did not recognize her daughter. She could not have imagined that her home could be so clean and comfortable. The tramp was sitting at the table, drinking tea against the general entourage. He now looked very much at home. "Oh, here comes the hostess," he exclaimed happily. My. When did you do all this? How neat and tidy my house is. said Kathy to the astonished woman. I had to thank you somehow, hostess, for the night. By the way, I didn't even ask your name yesterday. My name is Kathy. Yesterday was a bit of a blur. It was an awful day. I only realized it on the way home. Oh, really? You did? If it weren't for you, I'd have had to sleep under the open sky, and the rain wouldn't have made it easy to find a new cabin. Even open garages aren't always on the way. You're welcome. On the contrary, are you keeping me company? I'm always alone. That's how I live. Work, home, home. Not even friends. No one to grind a word with. Even to myself, sometimes I couldn't admit that I was lonely. Tried to keep it a secret from everyone at work, of course, not a single close soul. All have one benefit on his mind. From time to time, she went out with Molly. She was the only person close to Kathy, but it's still not the same. A mother's love was no substitute for a father's, much less a man's, and she really wanted to be loved. She dreamed of a caring and kind husband with whom they would be once and for all their lives. That he would carry water, and she wouldn't have to work so hard regularly. Someone to hammer a nail in the house? If in the beginning she was greatly hindered by poverty, in time she did. To her humble existence. Yes, she had no money, no education, and no way to fix the situation and change her life. But all the same, it is necessary to live, accepting the existence that is given by birthright from above. Kathy began to set the table. It was getting late in the evening. Night was approaching. Meat was on the griddle. The sizzling salad was arranged on plates, and the red silent drink was poured into a glass. "Stephen, it's time for the table," shouted Kathy from the kitchen. The man got out of bed, closed his room, and sat down at the table. She sat down across from him. How delicious is this meat? I haven't eaten this kind of meat in 100 years. I can't even remember anymore, to be honest. The last time I ate meat. And the Olivier salad even less. All these delicacies are left in my past life. The vagabond marveled. You promised to tell me about your life. I want to get to know you better, and you probably need to pour out your soul to someone. I don't think you had any regular friends on the street. The tramp began his story, and Kathy listened intently. His eyes reflected a kind of banal sadness he had long since come to terms with. Banal story. Worked as a simple engineer. Salary was average in the city. He did not have to qualify for more. He and his wife lived soul to soul. But they never had kids. He took it easy too. He had a job, she was always away at school, and didn't sit in her notebook in the evenings. On the way, I decided to stop at the store to buy something special for my guest. In all the time he'd been wandering around, he probably didn't remember what normal human food was anymore. For some reason, she wanted so badly to surround him with warmth and homeliness, to give him all the things he didn't have. Even then, last night, when she saw him at the door wet, dirty, found, as if she felt a kindred soul in him. She saw herself only as a man. Here she was, an orphan without lineage or tribe. So deceived with her own parents even at birth, no one wanted and lonely. Kathy entered the house and did not recognize her daughter. She could not have imagined that her home could be so clean and comfortable. The tramp was sitting at the table, drinking tea against the general entourage. He now looked very much at home. "Oh, here comes the hostess," he exclaimed happily. My. When did you do all this? How neat and tidy my house is," said Kathy to the astonished woman. "I had to thank you somehow, hostess, for the night. By the way, I didn't even ask your name yesterday. My name is Kathy. Yesterday was a bit of a blur. It was an awful day. I only realized it on the way home." "Oh, really? You did? If it weren't for you, I'd have had to sleep under the open sky, and the rain wouldn't have made it easy to find a new cabin. Even open garages aren't always on the way. You're welcome. On the contrary, are you keeping me company? I'm always alone. That's how I live. Work, home, home. Not even friends. No one to grind a word with. Even to myself, sometimes I couldn't admit that I was lonely. Tried to keep it a secret from everyone at work, of course, not a single close soul. All have one benefit on his mind. From time to time, she went out with Molly. She was the only person close to Kathy, but it's still not the same. A mother's love was no substitute for a father's, much less a man's. And she really wanted to be loved. She dreamed of a caring and kind husband with whom they would be once and for all their lives. That he would carry water, and she wouldn't have to work so hard regularly. Someone to hammer a nail in the house. If in the beginning she was greatly hindered by poverty, in time she did. To her humble existence. Yes, she had no money, no education, and no way to fix the situation and change her life. But all the same, it is necessary to live, accepting the existence that is given by birthright from above. Kathy began to set the table. It was getting late in the evening. Night was approaching. Meat was on the griddle. The sizzling salad was arranged on plates, and the red silent drink was poured into a glass. "Stephen, it's time for the table," shouted Kathy from the kitchen. The man got out of bed, closed his room, and sat down at the table. She sat down across from him. "How delicious is this meat? I haven't eaten this kind of meat in 100 years. I can't even remember anymore, to be honest. The last time I ate meat, and the salad even less. All these delicacies are left in my past life," the vagabond marveled. "You promised to tell me about your life. I want to get to know you better, and you probably need to pour out your soul to someone. I don't think you had any regular friends on the street." The tramp began his story, and Kathy listened intently. His eyes reflected a kind of banal sadness he had long since come to terms with. Banal story. Worked as a simple engineer. Salary was average in the city. He did not have to qualify for more. He and his wife lived soul to soul. But they never had kids. He took it easy too. He had a job. She was always away at school and didn't sit in her notebook in the evenings, and the two of us weren't bad. It was an ordinary apartment in the suburbs. And I'm thankful that at least we were given one. Many people I knew had been without a place to live their whole lives. Couldn't even get a wooden house. "Stephen, let's get a divorce." One day his wife said, when he came home from work. It was an ordinary day. Nothing seemed to suggest it. Stephen was surprised at such a suggestion. "I've met another man," the wife continued. "I want to leave, and I have the right to do so. Times are different now. Divorce will not affect your career or mine. Let's part as human beings. There was never love between them. They just have to build a life somehow." That's what they were trying to do, and it's easier with just the two of them. Shared budget, shared savings, shared housing. In the end, my wife took over the 2-room apartment. We had to privatize it, otherwise we would not be able to sell it. We gathered the documents. Everything was solved. I came home and could not open the lock. Fiddled with the key, fiddled with it. A strange man opens the door for me. I asked him what he was doing here, and he said that he had bought an apartment and given all the money to Larissa. I even tried to call her, but could not find her. The tramp continued his story. "What about the police, the courts? Why didn't you apply anywhere?" Surprisingly asked Kathy. "Yes, I tried. It turns out that she somehow arranged the documents with a realtor, that I was out of business. And everything is official. No way to prove anything. First time I rented a room, but the years go by. I took a part-time job when I was laid off, but it was getting harder and harder. I was fired from my last job. The landlady waited a few months to pay the rent, then he evicted me." Kathy understood him well. She had never been so frank with anyone before. For the first time in a long time, she was able to tell someone about her orphan's plight, to share the most intimate things that were weighing on her soul. They talked all night and into the morning. Kathy didn't even notice how they became closer than she had planned. It was true love at first sight. Kathy didn't even think about what the future held for her. A few months passed. Soon it would be time to quit her job. Her belly would be visible. "You know, no one will give me a maternity leave in a restaurant. I'll have to look for other options after the birth of a child," already shared her plans Kathy. "Oh, Kathy, my girl, but how did you get into this mess?" "To get mixed up with that tramp. I read Molly. He's a lot older than you are." "Well, we agreed that you wouldn't speak ill of Stephen. I love him. We're soulmates. Yeah, he's older than me, but who cares? But he loves me responsibly. He does everything around the house, works. Not like a lot of modern boys who only think about themselves. Molly was horrified when she realized that her words were beginning to come true. Then, 2 years ago, when she had taught Kathy at her graduation from the orphanage told her about loneliness. How had she feared that the girl would throw herself on the neck of the first man she met? But this was not something even she could have expected. Molly could not hide her indignation. She tried her best to persuade Kathy to kick the former tramp out. These conversations never ended in anything but resentment and conflict. When Molly found out Kathy was pregnant, she was shocked. "Are you having a boy or a girl?" "Molly? Oh, we're having 3 days. I did an ultrasound at the neighborhood clinic," Kathy said. "With burning eyes for 3 days. Are you serious? That's a great blessing, of course, but will you pull it off?" "Molly, well, do not worry. That's how Stephen works the house, albeit rented. We have a registration. I'll give birth for free, no money required. And then I'll take care of the kids for a year. And then I'll go to work. Will you help me? You're already retired, aren't you?" "Yes, Kathy, of course. I'll always support you in raising the kids. I'll take on some of that. You don't have much experience. What about Stephen?" "Okay, I won't. We don't have to fight, and you don't have to be nervous. I'll help you. Just take care of yourself." Kathy and Stephen had been together for 6 months, and that was the happiest time in the girl's life. That very first night, she felt it was forever. She didn't listen to any arguments. Molly understood what was happening, but there was nothing she could do about it. The pattern of orphans with low self-esteem who never managed to get their lives together. There would have been faith in herself and confidence in her own abilities. Never would she have let a tramp into her house that night. She saw herself in him, felt a kindred spirit, which is why she trusted him so quickly and bonded with him. Molly was sure that not only was Stephen not the man who could make Kathy happy, but he wasn't even the man he claimed to be. The woman's intuition rarely failed her. She was almost never wrong. But she had no proof or argument for Kathy. And she loved him without a backward glance and trusted him in everything. Finding shelter with Kathy Tramp, processed documents, wrote a statement to the police about the loss. And after a while, he received a new passport. The registration was arranged by Molly, but not out of kindness, but because Kathy begged with tears in her eyes. She was also registered with her more. After graduating from the orphanage, the girl had nowhere else to go. "Have you applied to the registry office yet?" Molly asked. "Yes, in 2 months the wedding is going to take place," Kathy answered. "You are planning a celebration, but it will not be a big one. And we have no one to invite, so we'll just sit quietly at home. And Stefan doesn't have anyone close to him but me. I'll think about what to get you. You're not offended? If I take your position into account?" "Of course not. I don't expect any gifts. There's no need to spend. You're not in the best of situations either. I'm an excellent seamstress. I wanted to make you a dress for your wedding and something for the little ones to be. I really need it. I can't afford to buy anything. Everything is so expensive these days. That's great. I'd be happy to. You know I'm not picky. Then let's take your measurements because it's almost evening. I'll start sewing tomorrow. I'll have time to make a veil and a blouse in time for the wedding. You'll be there, you know. If anything, I'll keep or sew, if I suddenly like you." Kathy laughed. After taking the measurements, Molly had some tea, and then they went home. "Well, Kathy, I'll be off then. I have to wait for the bus, and it's dark outside." "Stephen, what time will you be home?" Molly asked, but it should be a little over an hour by now. He was planning to finish the crib today. Next week, they plan to make 2 more and then paint them. For a boy and for a girl. Such a good hand he has. He knows how to do everything. With pride for her future husband, Kathy said, "All right, come on, goodbye. I will definitely come back in a week to see how the wedding dress is sewn." Kathy hugged Molly goodbye. She was immensely grateful to her for having her all her life. The woman was like a mother to her. Kathy closed the door, went to her room. She needed to rest. It was a hard day. Tomorrow she should quit. The belly could still be hidden, but it was getting harder to work. She didn't notice how she fell asleep, woke up an hour later, and started making dinner. Stephen should be home by now. Kathy thought to herself, but maybe he stayed out somewhere. 3 hours passed. It was very dark outside, and Stephen still hadn't returned. The girl left the house and walked around the neighborhood. There were no lights on in the neighboring houses, and Stephen was nowhere to be found. Kathy returned home and continued to wait. Her heart was not in the right place, so she sat there until 4:00 a.m. She never waited for Stephen that night. She stayed up all night and went to the nearest police station as soon as she began to bloom. She felt something had happened to Stephen, and the sooner they started looking for him, the better chance she had of getting in help in time. "Good morning. What's your emergency?" The investigator looked tired, but ready to talk. "My husband is missing. We've been living together for 6 months. He usually came home at 10 p.m., but in extreme cases at 11 p.m. Then today he didn't come home. I waited until morning, just in case he didn't make it to the bus, but he never came home. So it hasn't been 3 days since your husband left home?" "No. Why does it matter?" "Young lady, we can only start the search after 3 days. That's the law. Were you officially married?" "No. We were planning to get married, and we applied to the registry office. I can provide a certificate if it's important." "Yes, he could have just walked out on you. Why did you consider that option? Many men now live with women in a so-called common law marriage. He leaves one day and then look for them. And women sometimes do that too. You know, I've been working a long time. I've seen a lot." "Really? How could he leave? We love each other so much. He's everything to me, to our family. We're waiting for the 3 of us. How can you even think that he could just walk out on me?" The girl, nothing. "I don't think. I'm just making an assumption. Things happen in life. I've heard worse stories than that." "Okay, give me your information. Write up a statement. Let's start a search, if you insist." She left the police station on wobbly legs and headed straight to the bus stop. She had only to wait for the bus to get to Molly. She was the only person who could support her in this situation. Thoughts flashed through her mind. What if the investigator was right, and he had really just taken off, scared of the responsibility of the future, so he decided to disappear, just like that, without explaining anything? No, that just can't be. If he wanted to leave, he would have done it much earlier. I told him right away that I was pregnant. He knew from the very first month. He was so genuinely happy. He'd never had children, and now he was so happy. He was really happy. You can't fake that kind of emotion. Something must have happened to him, and I have to find out. So she pondered all the way until she reached her bus stop. After getting off the bus, Kathy literally ran toward the house. Molly from the intercom. Elevator. The doorbell rang. There was a sleepy voice coming from behind the door at this early hour. "It's me, Kathy. I'm sorry I'm so early, but I've had an accident," Kathy said. "I put the lock on." Molly was in one row. Ever since she quit her job, she'd never gotten up early. Retirement and well-deserved rest, after all. All her life she hadn't slept well. And it was only now that she finally had the opportunity. "Come in. Put your slippers on. Since you're here, we'll have tea. In the meantime, tell me what happened to you." Molly invited Kathy into the kitchen. She didn't even notice her weeping eyes and tired look. Stephen was gone. The girl said it so quietly that Molly didn't even hear it again. "Stephen is missing. I've been waiting for him since last night. How did I see you off? And he never came. I waited for him until morning. Then I went to the police. They said they would be looking for him. I felt in my heart that something had happened to him." "Yes, he ran away from you, Kathy. Why are you being so naive? A grown man, living with a young girl for his own pleasure. Didn't know any grief. He was sure that he couldn't have children. And here you are, slim. He had a family to provide for. What kind of a father is he? I told you to keep your ears open. How can you say that? He was so happy when I told him about the kids. We've been together 6 months. He could have left right away. As soon as he found out about the kids, I got pregnant the first month we lived together. Okay, let me get this straight. What did the investigator say?" "Yeah, the same thing you did." "Why do you all feel that way about him? He's not a traitor. He loves me. Something happened to him." "Oh, naive girl, you don't know life yet. I never told you that. But I'm going to tell you now. And that's how you want to take my words. But I only wish you well. You didn't marry him for love at all. You're an orphan. Your father never had any support. You've lacked that all your life. You took him for your father, who was destitute and had a hard life. That's why you trusted and loved him. Only it's not the kind of love that a woman loves a man. You just needed a father's support. And he took advantage of you. You know what they say, gray in the beard and black in the brow. Think about it. Maybe you don't need to look for him. Kathy sat there crying. She didn't even know what to say to all this. Everyone was against her, and it was useless to argue. Molly certainly could not be persuaded, and the police investigators would figure it out. Girl, don't you cry. Have you hugged Kathy, Molly? I can't. That he left me, I can't believe it. Just the thought of something happening to him. I can't find myself. Through my tears, I said, Kathy, you know what? It's better to stay in a room with running water than in the village house. Especially in your position, you don't drink water. And if it breaks, there will be no living at all. Go on, take the bus back there and get your things. I'll give you money for a cab, so you don't have to carry the heavy stuff yourself. And you'll find a way to deal with your father. Where would he go? All the way home, all she could think about was him. Where could he have disappeared to? What could have happened? The neighborhood they lived in was not the most prosperous. It took about an hour to get to work and an hour to get back. He always came home late. But nothing ever happened. The police aren't likely to take action anytime soon. So we'll just have to look for it ourselves. Yes, I'll go looking tomorrow. First thing in the morning. And I'll ask my neighbors. I'll go through some of the neighborhoods. I'll be sure to find him. Whatever it takes, alive or dead. But I will find him. Kathy kept thinking to herself, walking into the rented house that she had to leave in a few days because she had no money to pay the rent. There weren't many houses in their neighborhood. It was a solid foxhole, a strip. Most of the dwellings had long been abandoned. Who needed them? The old people were dead, and young people didn't need houses like that. She had already passed several houses. No one saw or heard anything. The grandmothers, who strictly observed the surroundings, said that the night before last, the man had not come home. Stephen didn't know much, but few people came to these parts to sleep overnight, so everyone was conspicuous. After walking through the neighborhood, Kathy headed for the neighboring neighborhoods. Not far from them, Stephen was working, or maybe he just said he was working. For the first time in a long time, Kathy realized that she knew absolutely nothing about him. He said he got a job as an employee at a car service. There aren't many of those in town either, but it takes strength to get around them all. Hello, I turned to the man in the work suit who was washing the car. Hello, do you need your car washed? Did you have an appointment? The man replied, wiping his hands on the oiled rag. No, I have another question. You see, my husband is missing. I am looking for him. It's possible he worked for you. What's your husband's name? Stephen. Let me show you a picture. Look, he didn't happen to work for you. No, I've never met anyone like that. Kathy decided to go to every service station in town, but she heard the same thing everywhere. Stephen not only didn't work there, he'd never even been seen before. That meant one thing: he didn't get a job at the service station. He was lying, but why? Why not tell the truth? She didn't get home until late afternoon. Molly, I'm home, and we have a printer. Or maybe someone you know, someone you started with? Kathy, right from the threshold to you have not even had time to undress. Come on, let me give you my printer. What do you need it for? Molly asked. I've been to every service station in town. I told you. Remember, Stephen worked there. Imagine, it turned out that none of them even knew him. I'm not surprised. I told you from the beginning it was all lies. What's a car service for him? Vagrants don't work. Molly, you can't change my mind. I'll still be looking for him. You don't understand. Stephen is the closest thing I have to a man. I fell in love with him at first sight. After all, I'm carrying his children under my heart. I have to find him, no matter what it costs me. Kathy was going off on a scream. Molly did not continue this conversation. She had the printer and even the paper. She took it out of the closet and plugged it in. There was only enough paper for 50 ads. Kathy typed them up into the night. Where are you going again? Molly went out into the hallway, hearing that the girl was already putting on her sneakers. "I'm going to the neighborhood. I have to put up an ad. We got it done in the morning. Maybe someone saw it. Maybe someone will call. I gave your phone number. You don't mind," Kathy answered. She threw off her jacket. "Oh, they're restless. Well, I filed a report. Now let the police do their job. What do you want more than anyone else? Especially in this position, you need rest and quiet." "Molly, I already told you, don't stop me. I'll still be looking for Stephen. Whatever it is, I need to know exactly what happened." She closed the door behind her. Molly knew it was useless to change Kathy's mind as long as that truth didn't make things worse. The woman thought to herself. All day long she drove around the city, deliberately finding boards in the most crowded places to hang the announcement there. She believed that this would definitely work. There was no hope for the police. If they did find Stan, it would not be for several months at the earliest. Such cases could last for years, and that was a long time. What if he needed help right now? And there's no one around. That day she had more time than usual to stop by the restaurant. Christina and the receptionist, Peter, informed her about her pregnancy and her dismissal. Weren't they upset? She hadn't been at work for several days. In that time, they had time to find another assistant. You didn't have to stop by. It was a waste of time. Kathy thought to herself as she got on the bus. There was still the matter of the house to solve. In 2 weeks' time, it was either pay or vacate the house. And what if Stephen comes back, finds the door locked, or worse, other total strangers? And I don't even have a phone. He'll be looking for me. While I was thinking about it, I decided I should leave a note for the landlady. That's what I'm going to do. Molly, Kathy came back tired, all day on her feet, on the road. And there was no opportunity to eat, because food in town was very expensive. And there was no money. The girl immediately fell asleep. In her dreams, she saw him in the back of her mind. She understood that he had been deceiving her for a long time, but she could not admit it to herself. When I find him, he will surely explain everything to me, thought Kathy as she fell asleep. Yes, they were so long that it seemed like weeks had passed. And in fact, it had happened. Just the day before yesterday, Kathy had managed a lot in those few days, had quit her job at the restaurant, had settled an issue with the landlady of the house. She temporarily decided not to give up her shack, and willing to live on the outskirts of the city in a deserted place in a 20-minute walk from the bus stop was not found. If Stephen showed up, he would see a notice pinned on the door with the landlady's coordinates, and she would give him a note with Molly's address. "Kathy, you keep sitting there looking out the window." Concernedly, Molly asked. "You know, I don't want anything," Kathy answered aloof. "Maybe you could at least sing. But if not for yourself, at least think about the children. What are they to blame? And how will they grow up without a father? What's going to happen to me now?" Molly was with us and did not go to the police, did not find out. Have they started looking for Stephen? No, they would have called a long time ago if they'd found out anything. I gave them your number. Kathy went into the kitchen, brewed some tea, and stared out the window again. She wanted to believe in the best, but she knew that hope was getting slimmer and slimmer. If he just stayed late at work, missed the bus, or dropped in on someone, he'd be home by now. Something must have happened to him. But the man couldn't just disappear, could he? She didn't have many ads left. She printed them out and 20 more. I'll go and unseal them. And I'm going to stop by the police as well. Better than sitting at home, buried in her own thoughts and doing nothing, she thought to herself and went to pack. "Kathy, where aren't you even eating?" Molly was seriously worried about the girl's condition. "I'm going to the police. Maybe they've started a search, and I can find out something about Stephen. Put up flyers while I'm at it. I'm still hoping someone will call. Maybe he's been seen near the woods or in the neighborhood." "Molly, I hope so." The longing in Kathy's voice indicated that she was in a desperate state. Molly understood that. She left the house and got on the bus, and took almost the same route as yesterday. The only difference was in the places where she put up advertisements. This time, Kathy went around to some more distant neighborhoods from her former home. When she was finished with the posters, she went to the police. Good afternoon. I'm here to see the investigator. Kathy, my husband Stephen is missing. I came to see you the day before yesterday to file a report. I wanted to know if the search had begun. Kathy spoke clearly into the duty window. Wait for the investigator in front of room 212, second floor to the right, the policeman politely answered. She went up to the second floor and knocked on the said office. The door was closed and no one answered the knock. All right, I'll wait. There is time, especially since the ad had already been posted. I have nothing else to do today anyway, thought Kathy to herself. I had to wait about half an hour. It turned out that she arrived just in time for the lunch break. The investigator had just gone out to eat. How could he even think of lunch when my Stephen was still missing? Indignantly to herself, Kathy. She just didn't realize how many such reports people bring to the police every day, how many people go missing every hour, that crimes were committed every minute, and even with the most well-coordinated police work, it was impossible to stop the series of such events. Didn't understand or didn't want to understand. How long have you been waiting? Did the investigator's voice bring you out of your reverie? Oh no. I would have waited about half an hour for you anyway. You know how important it is to me. This time she spoke clearly, not as aloof as the last. She was sure she would find him. Come in. I have some information on your case. I will give you some details. You have already begun your search. Well, that's very encouraging. Yes, we took the application right away. I really appreciate it. So did you find Stephen? No, Kathy, unfortunately, you don't have much to be happy about. We did a sweep of the wooded area, and we didn't find any dead or alive or lost people. We also talked to locals who live either directly in your area or in the area where your fiancé allegedly worked. No one saw or heard anything. Next, they put out an APB to neighboring cities and asked the hospital morgues to report if a person similar in description was admitted to them. You did a great job. Thank you very much. But I'm not just counting on you. I've put up posters in several neighborhoods with Stephen's picture on them. I'm hoping someone will respond. I'll give you a call if they do. Goodbye, Kathy. Goodbye, Kathy. She was genuinely surprised by the interest of the police. They had already done so much to find Stephen. Kathy hoped there would be a result. There just couldn't be. And now all that was left to do was wait. And that waiting was the scariest part. She doesn't know where he is, what's wrong with him. Thoughts jumbled in her head, and she couldn't organize them in any way. The only thing she wanted right now was to go home, lie down, and go to sleep. It seemed to her then that sleep healed in her sleep. It was easier to get over everything that had happened. Kathy dreamed that when she woke up, Stephen would be there. He was just away on business. Didn't want to warn me, or didn't see fit. She thought to herself. As she rode the bus, she just stared out the window. She had no energy to think or feel. She wished it would all be over sooner. Molly, I was at home, throwing off my jacket and sneakers. Kathy said in a tired voice. So what news did you manage to find out anything? Let's wash our hands and get to the table. Molly had already cooked dinner and was only waiting for Kathy to return. Yes, no news. Similar to the description of the corpses in the morgues, there was no news. No one like that had been brought to the hospital either. But the cops, you have to hand it to them, are doing a great job. I was even pleasantly surprised by that. And they've already started a search. Of course, Molly, I was surprised themselves that they were so quick to look for Stephen. Come on, eat up, my girl. Honestly, I'm so sleepy. I'll eat now and go right to sleep. You know, I'm so tired these days. I want to go to sleep and then wake up and be all right. I understand you, honey. We ate dinner in silence. Molly didn't know what to say to Kathy so as not to upset her. She had made her own conclusions about what had happened a long time ago, but she did not say them out loud. It was no use. Kathy would not be changed anyway. It would be good if she could find him after all. But there was no hope for that. She went into her room and immediately slumped her head on the pillow. The fatigue she had accumulated over the past few days was beginning to show through her sleep. She heard the doorbell ring, but she had no energy to even get up and see who had come at such a late hour. Who is there so late? We're not expecting anyone. Molly thought to herself as she headed for the door. "Who is there?" A woman asked. "My name is Maria. I am from the ad." A woman's voice came from behind the door. "I'm sorry it's so late, but believe me, we need to talk." The door shut. On the threshold stood a young woman, about 35 years old. She was very well dressed with hair and makeup. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Kathy got out of bed and walked out into the hallway. "Here comes Kathy. She can be present during our conversation." I wondered. "Molly, not that she can, but she must," the woman replied. They went into the kitchen. "I will begin at once, so as not to waste your time or mine, especially since it's so late. I came all the way from the city to see you," Maria said in an arrogant tone. "Which one of you? And by what right is she spreading slander about my husband? What is this all about? I found your ad, in which though I hardly recognized my Kevin. He looks very old, but I could distinguish his facial features. Where did he go?" "He was away on a business trip for a few months, but he came back recently." Not Molly, not Kathy, didn't understand what was going on. When they heard the words of a woman they did not know, they were literally taken aback. They were looking for Stephen, who had left home for work a few days ago and had not returned. What Kevin are we talking about? What wife if he was divorced? There were many questions, and this woman had to answer them. "What are we talking about?" "I'm looking for my future husband. His name is Stephen. He left home to go to work. I waited for him all evening and he never came back. In the morning, I went to the police and filed a report. In parallel with the police, I've been looking for my husband myself." The posters were posted. I tried to explain to Kathy, "Young lady, what are you talking about? The man's name is Kevin. He never wore a beard, but I can assume you took his picture on a business trip. He works as a journalist, so he often travels on business trips. The living conditions on such trips are difficult. They don't always allow you to meet and shave, but it's not that important. You're sure you're not mistaken? I'm sure of what I'm saying. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone this far at this late hour. My husband, with whom I have lived for more than 25 years. I recognize the unshaven one too. Who gave you the right to put up these ads anyway?" "That Stephen is my husband, and his name is Kevin." Kathy listened to Maria and couldn't believe it. She refused to understand what was happening. Every word hurt. She suddenly felt dizzy. "Wait a few minutes. I'll take her to her room, and then you and I will talk," said the stranger to Molly. She led Kathy to the room. "It's just a normal faint. It is nothing to worry about. She needs to rest right away." The words spoken drove the girl finally. "Cover Kathy with the plaid." Molly returned to the kitchen. "I am listening to you attentively. I want to know where and under what circumstances did you meet my husband, and what is going on?" In a commanding tone, declared the stranger. "You see, this girl is my foster child. She grew up in an orphanage and then rented a house." Molly began her story. "To tell you the truth, I'm not interested in the fate of this girl. Let's cut to the chase. It's almost nighttime. I've got to get home. Don't interrupt, please." Kathy worked as a waitress, rented a house. Just an ordinary life. One night a man knocked on her door. He was all dirty and ragged. Said he was a tramp. He was practically dying that night. He'd been wandering on her doorstep for years. He had a cabin not far from Kathy's house. And in that terrible storm, the wind blew it away. Out of the goodness of her heart, she opened the door for him. He asked to sleep over for a few days, and she let him in. They lived together for a few days and then suddenly became close. She kept him under her maiden's wing. She expects 3 children from him. What are you talking about? I don't believe that, and I never will. We have 3 children of our own. They're all grown up and on their own. The youngest daughter just recently turned 18. We have a full house. And Kevin has never been, and never will be. He doesn't need it. He is a successful and wealthy man. And he couldn't join any wench. A tramp, what kind of a tramp is he? He's got a 2-story house, his own wife, kids, a decent wage. Molly listened and couldn't believe it. And Maria was kind of sure she wasn't saying that her husband introduced himself as a tramp, or that he lived with another girl. It wasn't that hurting her 3 children didn't embarrass this unwavering woman. She was as sure of her husband as she was of herself, and there was no point in convincing her of anything. "What do you want from us?" Molly asked. "What do I want?" "I want you to take down the posters of your husband's picture on the walls of the city, even though he's in these photos and does not look like him. And close acquaintances find out, so not enough embarrassment." The stranger started to be rude. "Are you sure you're not mistaken? And we're really talking about the same person? You are so unwavering in your insolence. It doesn't bother you that your husband has been under the same roof for over 6 months. Lived with another girl. And the children? It's provable that he's the father, isn't it? My girl's clean, never been mixed up with a man. Your Kevin, or whatever his name is, Stephen? He's got so many names, I don't even know now. The only one she ever had was with no one. My husband didn't live, and he has no other children besides ours and can't have any. Listen to yourself, what are you accusing an honest man of? My husband has lived his whole life only with me, and he is faithful to me. It's your girl. Let her tell the truth. Who did she have her children with? You'll have to carry them with her now, won't you?" The conversation was gradually turning into a scandal, and there was no point in continuing. Molly could see in her eyes that Maria understood, except that she would never give up her husband. The only thing that remained unclear was why he was pretending to be a tramp. Why had he come to a stranger's house late at night? Even assuming he was in a difficult situation, why didn't he leave after a few days? A young girl had caught his eye. He wanted a break from his wife. There were more questions than answers, wrapped in plaid. Kathy Maria came out into the kitchen, awake. "I would like to see him." Quietly, she said. "Why?" With a pompous expression, the stranger was indignant. "I want to look into his eyes, and I want to make sure you're not confused, and that you and I were living under the same roof with the same man. You never lived with him. You're lying. And you're probably having kids with some friend of yours who's got no money, but you've been out with him. And you're lying to your mother so she won't kick you out. Anyway, if it's not too late for you, let's go. My husband will tell you to your face that he's never seen you and doesn't know you. We'll dot our I's and cross our T's. Let's go." Kathy and Molly went to get ready and then got into the stranger's car. Maria knew how to drive. She was so confident that it was reflected in her every gesture. Kathy was the exact opposite of this strong-willed woman. "I wonder if at least deep down she guessed that we hadn't lied to her," she thought to herself. Maria had known Sergei for a long time. His periodic trips on business trips repeatedly made her suspicious, but she tried not to pay attention to it. In the past, he had dreamed of becoming an actor, reincarnating in different characters, performing on stage. But the Theatrical Institute did not take him unrealized talent. Perhaps the reason for this, or maybe something else. Life has decided otherwise to make reports, and writing at him came out much better than the acting. That's why he became a journalist for a local regional newspaper. He was one of the best. Maria was proud of her husband, of his successes, of his achievements. And behind the screen of all this, she absolutely did not notice, sometimes appearing deviations in her psyche. But she would not give herself or him away, under any circumstances. Let them talk. I'm sure they won't agree on anything. Why would he abandon his family for a girl who would sit on his neck with 3 kids? I don't think that's going to happen. Maria pondered. On the way, the car stopped. Everyone has arrived. Wait, I'll put the car in the garage and let's go inside. The woman threw open the car door. While Maria put the car in the garage, Kathy and Molly looked around the house and the immediate surroundings. Respectable, but not wealthy. An ordinary 2-story house. There were many of these in the South with a wicket gate, 1 garage. He was not rich, but wealthy enough to live without needing anything. "Maria, we have guests." A man's voice came from the room. "I'll put the kettle on and we'll have dinner." Kathy had not yet seen his face, but she recognized the voice. She would recognize it from 1,000 others, and she would never forget it. And here was the face. He looked much younger than when they were together. There was no beard. His face was shaved smooth. The haircut was short. He did not look at all like the beggar and almost dying tramp who had stood on her doorstep a few months before. But his facial features gave it away. It was definitely him. There was absolutely no doubt about it. She was the first to wash her hands and go into the kitchen, and sit directly across from him, and stare intently into his eyes. That look was not blank. She knew he would recognize her. But would he say so? "Why are you looking at me so strangely?" asked the man, taking cups from the cupboard and pouring tea into them. "Don't you recognize me?" Stephen said to Kathy. "No, I don't. By the way, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Kevin. What's your name? Are you pretending? Or do you really not remember me? I don't understand what's going on. But remember, you came to me late at night. You didn't even have the strength to walk. You literally walked to the floor of your little house on the outskirts of town. Your hair was slick with mud and rain. You asked to spend the night, to stay for a few days before you found a new cabin. You said the old one was blown away by the storm. You've been vagabonding for years. For lack of a corner of your own, your wife cheated you out of an apartment in the divorce. And you never had children. Neither did you have any relatives you could turn to for help. Then you stayed with me. Don't you remember any of that? Young lady, you're not making any sense. I see you for the first time in my life. How could I live with you? What are you talking about? I went on a business trip. A few days ago, I went back to my family. I've never been a vagrant, and my wife never left me. Maria has been with me and our children all her life. Let me see your passport. You had your passport restored at our office. It has all your coordinates. Where did you do it? I'll go to my room in a minute. I have my passport in the grid there. When he came back from the room, the man handed Kathy his passport. Kevin, born in '78. The registration address is the house they were in now. There is also the address of his parents' apartment, from which he checked out a long time ago. The photos are fresh. Passport replaced not too long ago, just a few months ago. He doesn't look like that vagrant, but he looks a lot like the real him. That's when Maria came into the kitchen. What's going on here? Kevin, why are you showing your ID to strangers? Do you want to get credit on you? The woman asked angrily. No, Maria, what are you doing? The girl just thought I was someone she knew, and she didn't believe me. So I showed her my passport. It's okay, Maria. The man hugged his wife, and then proceeded to pour the tea. They sat in complete silence at the table. No one uttered a word. Okay, we're leaving now, quietly, Kathy said. She got up from the table and walked out into the hallway. Maria followed her. Well then, goodbye. It was very nice to see you. There wasn't an ounce of hypocrisy in Maria's voice. You know, she's a good actress after all. I'm not as good as she is. The girl thought to herself when they left the house. Molly looked at Kathy. There was a strange and uncharacteristic emptiness in her eyes. What are you going to leave it like that? But there is an expertise after all. At least let her pay child support. How the 3 children alone will raise? Thought Molly was out of control with indignation. She could barely contain her emotions when she was in the house. You don't understand. The most important thing is that I found him. I promised myself I would find him. He's alive and well and happy and doesn't even look like himself. All the rest is not that important. There was a desolation in the girl's voice. She walked down the dark road that led to the bus stop. Molly followed her as they left. Kevin, aka Stephen, locked himself in his office, took out the passport that Kathy had once helped him make and burned it. The mind page was on fire too. The smell was such that Maria knocked on the door. Are you doing something? She asked sternly. Nothing, dear. I burned some old pictures. I decided to take the old things out of the dust. As if nothing had happened, he said. Let's get it over with tomorrow. It's late. Let's go to bed. You're right, darling. Let's go together. They went into the bedroom. The wife thought her husband wouldn't sleep tonight. But 5 minutes later, Kevin literally vanished into sleep. It's been 4 years. Tony, get the boys and let's go to dinner. Pregnant Kathy smiled as she watched her husband and the 3 boys play on the lawn. Now her life resembled the fairy tale she had dreamed of for so long. But the road to that happy life was thorny and prickly, and if she hadn't met Anthony again by chance on her way, she might not have been able to cope with the pangs of her problems. But this seemingly not the toughest guy turned out to be a very decent and strong man. He found out what happened to Xenia. He helped her in everything. He supported her both morally and financially. He even liked Molly Anthony, and that means a lot. This woman has never been wrong about people. Orphan Kathy has found her family, and she will do her best to make sure that. There has always been boundless love and incredible happiness in their home.